Hey, Kindred Spirits! Welcome to Kindred Spirits Book Club, the podcast where two grown ladies geek out about Anne of Green Gables. I'm Reagan Duffy, here with my co-host, Kelly Gerner, and today is our final episode of Season 5. I cannot believe we are here already. Time flies when you are podcasting, I guess.
How is it the end of season 5? This is shocking to me. Shocking, first of all, that we've been doing this for 5 seasons. And second of all, that we are closing in on the end and ready to move into summer, take our traditional summer break. And right now, I am so excited for our upcoming trip, our return visit to Prince Edward Island.
Yay!
Yay! So, Kindred Spirits, we are going to be at the Ella Montgomery Conference at the University of Prince Edward Island this year at the end of June. And when this episode comes out, there will still be time to join. You can come in person, but there is also a virtual option if you can't make it all the way out to PEI. If you can, though, we really recommend it. We had the most amazing time at our last conference, and we are so thrilled to be going back. We are very honored to be on a panel this time around about teaching Ella Montgomery, and we are also going to be hosting a game night, and we are also going to be recording a live podcast right at the conference with a live audience and hopefully some fun audience question and participation. So a lot of big firsts for us. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed and hoping it all goes well. We have done a ton of planning and prep work, and we think we're going to have some great stuff for you all. I just can't wait.
I know. We've been having a blast coming up with ideas for game night.
Yes.
Kelly has found way too many cute things to give as prizes. I have set my husband to work with building some ways to do interactive games from a big screen that everyone could participate in. And we've got trivia and quizzes and lots of fun stuff. So I am really looking forward to it. So Kelly, what are you most looking forward to for like our Prince Edward Island trip in general?
The butter and cheese.
Yes.
Prince Edward Island is known for dairy, which we found out slightly ahead of our visit last time. And I remember we had like every morning we like had toast that we like slathered in that like a really good PEI butter. That's not really my answer, although it definitely is a perk of PEI. It is just so beautiful there. It is like no place else on earth. As beautiful as it is in your imagination from reading the Anne series, it is 10 times more beautiful in person. The people are friendly and lovely. There's so much to do, so many rich opportunities for literary tourism, and it's like no place else on earth. And I'm so grateful, honestly, that we get the opportunity to go back. I'm grateful that we get to do this as part of the podcast, part of our friendship. It's just going to be the best.
Oh my gosh, me too. I cannot wait. I definitely want to go back to Green Gables because that whole area around Green Gables, like the walk to Montgomery Park and the just all of that was so beautiful, so well done. I felt like I could have spent all day there. We spent almost all day there, but I feel
We
like I'm
pretty much
ready.
did, yeah.
We really did. I feel like I'm really ready to spend more time there. And there's
Yeah.
some Ella Montgomery tourism places we didn't get to that hopefully we'll get to this time. And I'm hoping we can get to the beach one day on a day that's sunny because the day that we
Yes.
went last time was kind of gray and cool and very atmospheric in a different way.
I thought it was amazing. It was super like windy and drizzly, and I really loved it, but it was not a beach day.
Right. I just for like the chance to kind of see the contrast between the sand and the water and the green grass. It was beautiful. I loved it. Like I'm not sad that's the way it was last time, but I'd love a different experience this time. Also, important question, Kelly. How
Mm.
many lobster rolls are you going to try this time? And are you going to bring back the lobster roll rating system?
I do plan to bring back my lobster roll Hunger Games and do a sort of lobster roll round robin style tournament to see
Yes.
which lobster roll on PEI will crown them all.
All right. Fantastic. Cannot wait. Stay tuned for the results.
Well, so Kindred Spirits, here is the thing. While this is the end of our regular season for season 5, do not worry about us being done with the podcast. We will have a couple bonus episodes heading to you from our time on Prince Edward Island. So look out, especially for the live recording of our podcast. And then our next season is going to be all about the Emily of New Moon trilogy. Now, neither one of us is as familiar with Emily as we are with Anne, but we have read it in the past. So we're going to go back, we're going to reread, and it's going to be really fun to kind of learn as we go with this deep dive. So that's your summer reading assignment. If you also haven't read Emily in a while or at all, now is the time. And I'm really looking forward to those discussions.
So for today, for our final episode of season 5, we are going to do kind of a hodgepodge of an episode. We had a lot of fun doing something similar when we wrapped up Rilla. One of our frequently recurring segments is what we call puffed sleeves, in honor of Anne Shirley's childhood wish for a beautiful dress with fashionable puffed sleeves, which Marilla refuses to make for her because they are ridiculous and a waste of fabric. So whenever we want space to talk about a moment that doesn't really fit with the theme of the episode, but we want anyway, we try to add a little puffed sleeves segment. What we have found in the last 2 seasons is we have so much to talk about. We haven't really had room for puffed sleeves. So let's just do a full Oops All Puffed Sleeve episode. But we're going to be talking about that with the Anne series as a whole. We realized we had kind of all of these little bits, these tangents we wanted to talk about, or things we thought of after an episode already aired. So let's do it now. So welcome to our Oops All Puffed Sleeves episode, a celebration of small, interesting, delightful, random notes from all over the Anne series.
Yay! And listeners, we would also really love to hear your puff sleeves moments as well. We always enjoy chatting with listeners over Instagram. We are kindredspirits.bookclub there, or via email, kindredspirits.bookclub@gmail.com. And we really think of that as being how the book club sort of like keeps going between seasons, right? We can keep those conversations going online. So if you do share with us some of your favorite small moments or observations from the Anne series, we'll reshare those on our Instagram for all of our followers to see. And we can, like I said, keep that conversation going. And if you are not following us on Instagram, you guys, this is really the time to do so, because this summer we're going to share tons of pictures from Prince Edward Island. We will probably do a live or two. This is going to be a really fun time to stay up to date with us on social media. And another quick note before we continue, if you are planning to pick up any of the books that we talk about today, we would love it if you used our bookshop.org storefront. It supports independent bookstores and helps support the show at the same time. There's a link to that in our show notes. And if you've been listening for a while and haven't yet left us a rating or review, it really does make a huge difference for us, especially a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, but really anywhere you listen is great. So thank you everybody for that, and on with the episode.
All right. Well, usually we start with a kindred spirit of the episode. And so as we were kind of pondering who should be our kindred spirit of the episode, I kind of thought maybe we are the kindred spirits of the episode, Kelly.
Maybe we are.
So either that's like meta or self-indulgent or both. But okay, honestly, I think the fact that we are 92 full episodes into this podcast and we still have things we have not talked about and want to talk about, I mean, maybe we are the kindred spirits. So yeah,
I think we might be.
Let's own it. Let's own it. And if you have listened to all of our episodes, then you too are a kindred spirit of the episode.
You absolutely are. You definitely get some kind of badge of honor. 92 episodes is a lot, and most of them are long. So thank you so much. We love having you here. Now, since today's episode is dedicated to puff sleeves, for our quote of the episode, we of course had to call back to the scene where Marilla has just given Anne 3 brand new dresses. Quote, "Oh, I am grateful," protested Anne, "but I'd be ever so much gratefuler if you'd made just one of them with puff sleeves. Puff sleeves are so fashionable now. It would give me such a thrill, Marilla, just to wear a dress with puffed sleeves." "Well, you'll have to do without your thrill. I haven't any material to waste on puff sleeves. I think they are ridiculous looking things anyhow. I prefer the plain, sensible ones." "But I'd rather look ridiculous when everybody else does than plain and sensible all by myself," persisted Anne mournfully. So, Reagan, you are currently living with a young teenager. Does that line feel more accurate than ever to you now?
Yeah, definitely more accurate than ever. This is definitely the age when the aesthetics of your clothing mean more than they will at any other time in your life.
Yep.
And let's be honest, my child is not a plain and sensible dresser, no matter what the other kids are wearing. That is for sure.
Well, so buckle up, guys. It is time for Story Club and our freewheeling compilation of puff sleeves moments from around the Anne series. I'm just going to let you know we are not promising any kind of logical connection between thoughts. We're not promising deep insights or emotional catharsis. This is just going to be some fun. Think of this as sort of like the end of your book club meeting where the group has already polished off the bottle of wine and everyone is just sort of saying, "Oh, just one more thing," right? As they're kind of walking out to their cars.
which Kelly and I are notorious for doing, and to be
Yep.
standing in the parking lot, one more thinging for like way too long. And Kelly, I just remembered we were going to drink during this episode.
Well, I fell down on the job. I'm not drinking. Not drinking alcohol anyway. I am drinking a delicious cucumber melon seltzer, which I'm enjoying very much.
Amazing. I had planned to bring my favorite hard cider, which
Mm.
is so good, but it's probably for the best because after we finish recording, I have to finish editing, so I can't go to bed.
And it is a school night. I
It
usually
is.
I usually don't drink on school nights, but you know what? If you want to come and have a white wine or a cider with us, the best way to do that is to find us at the conference this summer.
We went to some restaurant downtown where they had Anne themed cocktails.
They absolutely did. Yes, it was right across the street from the theater where Anne the Musical was playing.
And I feel like that's probably not the only place that has Anne themed cocktails.
I'm starting to think that maybe we should come up with our own Anne theme cocktail to just like have back at the Airbnb.
Oh,
Vegan.
I could get into some custom cocktails. Obviously, raspberry cordial has to be the base, right?
Yes. Okay, so if we have any mixologists who are listening, I'm going to need you to reach out to us,
Yes.
kindredspirits.bookclub@gmail.com, with any sort of Anne of Green Gables, raspberry cordial themed, anything that sort of evokes Prince Edward Island for you, cocktails. And Reagan and I will see if we can find a good one for our trip.
And if we do, we will post it on our Instagram and give you
For
credit.
sure. Well, Reagan, why don't you kick us off? What is that sort of one more thing you really wanted to come back to in all of our discussions about the Anne series?
Okay, so I've been thinking about this one for a while, and it might be a little controversial. So let's we'll start
Okay,
the
we're starting with hot takes. I
we're
love
starting
it.
with hot
Scorching
take.
hot takes.
Okay, I want to talk about why I think Anne is not ADHD or otherwise neurodiverse from my own therapeutic perspective as a therapist. Now, because I know that she is kind of one of the poster girls sometimes. A lot of folks with ADHD, particularly women or girls with ADHD, like see themselves in Anne. And I'm not saying that they're wrong at all. Anne is a fictional character. ADHD was not a diagnosis that we recognized at the time that Maud was writing. It makes total sense to me why it would feel like relief to see yourself in Anne, to see Anne act in ways that you recognize and identify with. And it feels good to be seen and understood on the page, especially because Anne gets to be so beloved and accepted by her community. So I'm not taking that away from you if you are somebody that strongly identifies with that. But on the other side, if I, as a therapist, was trying to diagnose Anne through these texts, looking at the series as a whole, I would not diagnose her with ADHD. And I say that as someone who works with ADHD folks of all ages, genders, and experiences. So I'm going to do a quick ADHD info dump, not to be used for diagnosing yourself or someone you know in real life. Asterisks there. The basic idea is ADHD has 3 types. And of course, it also occurs on a spectrum like most mental health diagnoses, but there is like kind of a minimum basic requirement. You have to have, there's like each of them have like a list of traits and you have to meet multiple of them. It has to impact daily living and it has to be inappropriate for age and developmental level, right? Like you could take any 5-year-old and they would look ADHD if you described those same things, but said the person was 12 or 16 or 18, right? So it has to be atypical for that age group, right? Also, you can't attribute it to, like, it can't be better otherwise explained by some other mental health issue going on. Okay, so the 3 types we've got inattentive type, and that's characterized by distraction, difficulty focusing, difficulty with follow through in organization, making careless mistakes. That's often where you're seeing like if people are talking about like absent-minded professor type, we're looking at like inattentive style ADHD. Often folks feeling like they have to work 3 times as hard as anybody else to stay organized, to stay on top of their tasks. And they always feel like they're struggling with that. The hyperactive/impulsive type is characterized by a kind of a physical restlessness. They can't sit still, constant fidgeting, talking excessively, interrupting, always on the go. And then combined type means you've got elements from both types together. Okay, so that's like basic ADHD primer. Nothing that Google wouldn't tell you. So let's talk about why I don't think Anne is ADHD. Because as soon as Anne has the stabilizing influence of Marilla Matthew Green Gables' life, as soon as she gets direct instruction, her impulsivity and abstraction immediately start changing. One important thing about ADHD is that it persists over time in different settings and as people move into different developmental stages. When when we think about the incidents that make us think about ADHD for Anne, it's almost all at the beginning of the book. Think about the blow up with Mrs. Lynde, smashing the slate on Gilbert's head, being distracted, daydreaming, and get the mouse in the pudding sauce. Marilla's being driven crazy by Anne's dreaminess and lack of attention, her chatterboxness of these epically long monologues. That's all in her first year of Green Gables. We see that Anne has no difficulty with schoolwork and organizing her work. She's not disruptive at Sunday school or school, aside from the slate smashing incident. She's able to not just succeed, but excel academically with no mention of feeling like she can't keep up, she can't stay organized, she's difficulty focusing on completing her work. And sure, folks could read between the lines that maybe that's happening off the page, but that's assuming some facts, not in evidence here, right? And we kind of forget, because of the way the book is structured, that seems like that's such persistent traits of Anne, all of those things. But honestly, it's all, the bulk of the story is her first year at Green Gables. The bulk of the book is that first year. So most of her scrapes are happening in that first year. And even the ones after, I don't think we can really attribute to ADHD. Like the green hair dye, that's dumb, but not ADHD.
That's a mistake anyone could make. And
Right.
same thing with like the Lily Maid incident, right?
Yes.
That's not ADHD. That's, who knew the boat was leaking.
Right, exactly. She didn't think to check the boat, but neither did any of her friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly a year after she's arrived at Green Gables, because they're talking about the anniversary of that, Marilla specifically tells Anne, quote, "You seem to have got on fairly well and made fewer mistakes than usual." So yes, Marilla still likes to complain about Anne and being featherbrained, but it seems to be much more about like Anne's kind of wild imagination, which is not specific to ADHD. And I would also propose for Marilla, living with a 13-year-old girl myself, that much of Anne's like excitability is due to her age, not to ADHD. I suspect that Marilla doesn't have a lot of experience with kids Anne's age and might have some age inappropriate expectations of behavior. So I think it's much more likely, if I was doing the diagnosing, that Anne was neglected and traumatized, that her chatter is part of her personality. You can be talkative and not have ADHD. It's part of her age, because you notice as she gets older, she doesn't monologue as much. But I don't know, most 11-year-olds will chat your ear off nonstop at any opportunity. And part of being a neglected, imaginative kid who just wants to connect with someone, anyone. Both of her major temper moments, the slate and the tantrum with Mrs. Lynde, that arose from being deeply anxious about belonging and her attributing not belonging to her own red hair. And both of those incidents, both Gilbert's carrots and Mrs. Lynde twitting her about her hair, poked at that deeply sore spot. So it was impulsive, sure, but I think that comes more out of her trauma than ADHD. The biggest evidence I have for Anne not being ADHD is that once Anne has this stable home and this direct loving guidance from Marilla, Mrs. Allen, Miss Stacy, she learns social skills, housekeeping skills, decorum, all of those things quickly. She applies what she learns really immediately. Anne even says, "I never make the same mistake twice." Anne quickly grows out of being distractible and unfocused. By the time Anne is studying for her Queen's exam, which she starts studying for her Queen's exam around the end of age 13, maybe
Right.
beginning of 14, right?
Mm-hmm.
Timing's a little unclear. Marilla says, quote, "She's real steady and reliable now. I used to be afraid she'd never get over her feather-brained ways, but she has, and I wouldn't be afraid to trust her in anything now." So for Anne to have grown out of that distractibility and impulsivity so quickly once she got a stable home tells me that it's not ADHD. Because from then on, once she starts studying for Queens, through the rest of her books, there is no mention of Anne struggling to manage her time, to stay focused, to follow through, to organize herself in any way. And from my experience of working with adult women with ADHD, especially without medication, which there wouldn't have been at Anne's time, there's often still a struggle to stay on top of everything, even when they're adults. Maybe they mask it well to others. Maybe they kind of brute force their way through it and they figured out some ways to kind of manage it. But usually there's this ongoing feeling like everyone else has it figured out. Everyone else can do this, but for some reason they can't. We never hear anything like that from Anne. Anne is a 16-year-old school teacher helping to raise Davy and Dora and managing a farm. Anne goes to college and achieves high honors with diligent study, yes, but it doesn't seem hard for her. Anne's the principal of a high school. I assume there's a ton of organizing involved in being the principal of a high school. But there's never any mention of failing to complete tasks or struggling in any way. ADHD is just not something you grow out of that quickly. It's a lifelong condition. And while often folks figure out ways to manage it over time, it doesn't disappear, especially not by age 16, by the end of Anne of Green Gables. So, in conclusion, if we only look at Anne's first year of Green Gables, it's easy to mistake her for ADHD. But I think it's much more likely that she was traumatized, untaught, neglected, and lonely. And then you combine that with a strong imagination, romantic personality, and extroverted nature, and being 11 years old. All of that might look like ADHD. If Marilla had brought her in to see me at age 11, let's say after the mouse and the pudding sauce incident,
She was like, this is the final straw.
let's say she brought her in, I would say, considering her history and considering that she's only been here at Green Gables not that long, the mouse and the pudding sauce, she tells Diana that around the raspberry cordial incident.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in her first couple of months.
Yeah.
I would say, let's just keep an eye on it. Considering her history, let's provide some support and teaching and guidance for her, provide her some love and some space to make mistakes, provide her some therapy for maybe some trauma, and see where we are 6 months, a year from now. And then we'll talk about it, investigate it a little bit more deeply. But I wouldn't diagnose it that early because there's just all of these other factors that could better account for a lot of those other things that Anne is doing in those very early months at Green Gables. Now, that doesn't mean she can't be a figurehead for folks that are neurodiverse in some way. So if she is for you, there's no reason she still can't be, because it is really validating to see that somebody can be experiencing life like that and you can see yourself that way in her character. And that feels really good because Anne is loved and she's successful, and all of those things feel good to know about somebody who maybe is struggling at the beginning of the book. So I'm not taking that away from you. I'm just saying that's the way that I would conceptualize it. But the way for me that Maud wrote Anne on the page, especially if we consider her whole lifetime, it's not a picture of ADHD. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Well, thank you for delivering your TED Talk, Reagan. I do think that is really interesting. When you think of Anne in that first year at Green Gables, so much of what's happening is, even setting aside healing from her traumatic past and learning to trust the Cuthberts and learning to feel at home in Avonlea, she's kind of like learning how to be a person.
Yeah.
Learning how to be a person in all the ways that 11 and 12-year-olds do anyway, but also learning to be a person in that she's finally in a household where, she is expected to maintain a certain level of decorum, where she's expected to help out around the house and participate in chores, and she's expected to do it at Marilla Cuthbert's standards.
Yeah. Right. And not as a drudge, but as a functioning member of this household, right?
Yes, exactly right.
This idea that somebody is caring enough to send her to Sunday school, caring enough to send her to school. This is the first time where Anne is expected to be a member of her community in this way. Okay, I'm done. Kelly, your turn.
Okay, so my sort of one more thing that I really wish we had spent a little bit more time on in our discussions was queer-coded characters in the Anne series. So like Reagan, I'm going to take a minute to sort of quickly define what I mean by queer coding. So we're kind of operating from the same foundation here. But queer coding is when creators are using implicit language to suggest that a character is queer without saying so outright. So this is going to be a character who is not coming out and saying I'm gay, or is not in like a homosexual relationship necessarily, or in any kind of obvious way, but there may be certain personality traits that would tend to indicate that that character could be queer. So this is something that we still see all the time, but it was incredibly common decades ago, hundreds of years ago, especially in eras and places where homosexuality was, or some of them still is, criminalized. Using coded language to tell stories about queer people was a really common way for LGBTQ people to see themselves on the page or screen and have their stories told in this sort of way where, like, if you know, you know, and if you don't know, it's just going to wash right over you. Does that make sense? We kind of on the same page there? Yeah.
That's a good explanation.
And I'll also just point out that queer coding is kind of a nuanced discussion because it also relies very heavily on stereotypes of LGBTQ people, stereotyping people is never necessarily a good idea. No one population is ever going to look, act, be the exact same way. And queer coding can also sort of veer in more harmful territories like queer baiting. I'm not even going to get into any of that for purposes of this simple discussion, but what I really just wanted to talk about was the characters in these books who queer readers have seen themselves in, either because those characters are like defying gender expectations or relationship expectations for the context of these books, or, you know, just sometimes you see someone on the page and you're like, that's me. That person reminds me of myself. So there's, I think, a couple tentpole queer figures in these books, and one of them, of course, is Anne. Reading Anne herself as a lesbian or bisexual is a really, really common reading, especially given the passionate connection between Anne and her bosom friend Diana. We know a lot of readers who look at that intense and romantic language that Anne uses to describe her friendship with Diana, and in that they see a textual support for a queer Anne, for a friendship with Diana that is romantic. It's not a strictly platonic friendship. Friend of the podcast, Laura Robinson, even published a paper that argued that Anne harbored lesbian desire, which caused a huge media stir when it was published in 2000.
Yeah, she really apparently got very, it was one of her first papers, I
I
think.
think yes, it was she was either still in grad school or like very early in her career when it came out.
Yes, and really it was extraordinarily controversial and she got a lot of hate for it.
Yeah, the backlash was intense. She for sure got like death threats, which is crazy. But I think a lot of the people in the Ellen Montgomery scholarly community were very open to the idea, and it probably wasn't even a particularly new idea. But there was just something about that article and the presentation which had kind of like went viral, such as it is for 2000. You know, it was a really big deal. But anyway, so this is not necessarily a new idea, but it has been a controversial idea. And, you know, Laura was looking at a couple of different things in her paper. She was, of course, looking at Anne and Diana's friendship, but she was also looking at the fact that Anne has like these deeply intimate connection with women throughout the book series. She has this deep friendship with Philippa Gordon, with Catherine Brooke, and with Leslie Moore. And so there's a couple ways to read this. You can read this in a very sort of straight lens, right? Like Anne is a girl's girl. She has these like deep, intimate friendship with other women, and that's central to her character. But you can also read that, especially as a modern reader, I think, you can also read the intensity of those friendships as potentially queer. And I will just say, Reagan, I love that. I love that for Anne. I love that for us. I love that she gets to be a character who can kind of exist in that duality. If you are reading it as a queer woman and you see these intense, almost romantic relationships with other women, that's very validating to see yourself on the page. And if you miss it because it doesn't resonate with you, then no harm, no foul. I mean,
Right.
that's kind of the beauty of these kinds of queer-coded readings.
It's okay if that idea doesn't resonate with you. She's not a
Mm-hmm.
real person. We're not outing her against
Nope.
her will, right? But I think it's also valid. I mean, this kind of even goes back a little bit to like the ADHD take,
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Very
Which
much
is that
so.
it's valid if that's the way that you see that and you experience that. Like, oh, there's something in that that reminds me of an experience I had or somebody I know or the way that that presents now. And I think, you know, a lot of the modern adaptations make that a little bit more textual. They make that more explicit.
And, you know, throughout the books, I do think we have plenty of other characters who readers can and do interpret as queer. I'm thinking of our very thoughtful, sensitive, beauty and poetry loving young men like Paul Irving and Walter Blythe, who are certainly defying some gender expectations for traditional masculinity and making space in that for a potentially queer reading. Thinking again about another article published by a friend of the pod, Benjamin Lefebvre, called Walter's Closet. We have enough textual support for a queer reading of Walter Blythe as well, and how even if you don't have to necessarily be in a homosexual relationship on the page for certain characteristics and certain traits to kind of come across as queer. At any rate, there's a room in the text, there's a room in Walter's storyline. You know, when you see, especially contrasting him to his brother Jem, there's room to think of him as a different kind of guy, a different kind of masculinity, a softer kind of masculinity, and maybe potentially a queer masculinity. And again, I just think it's lovely that this book gives us these options. And finally, all of the Anne books have this grand old tradition tradition of eccentric, unmarried older people who either are living alone or who live with family members. And the fact that they even exist in the text at all, that is creating a little space for the reader to ask, well, what happened? Why didn't they ever marry? Of course, there's lots of reasons why someone doesn't marry. Couldn't one potential reason be that they're gay?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, look, there is not a single one of these books that doesn't have some like eccentric unmarried older person. You know, whether it is the original owners of Patty's Place in Anne of the Island.
And also, so when you were talking about this, you know who I thought of that we haven't explicitly talked about was Aunt Kate and Aunt Chatty, both widows, but like they're not related. They were
Happily living together, doing
yeah,
whatever.
which kind of makes sense, right? In the sense of being like, okay, it's hard to have a household on your own, especially financially. And if we combine households, we're not lonely and we're not alone and we can afford our lifestyle. But also, there's no reason that Aunt Kate and Aunt Chatty couldn't find a loving relationship together.
100%. And again, none of this is on the page,
No.
but the whole point of queer coding is that reading this through a sort of queer lens is that you're looking for the sort of places in the text where there is space to imagine a homosexual relationship, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be explicit, it doesn't need to be stated, but when you see things like, you know, two women of a certain age sharing a household together, sure, it could be for financial reasons. Could it also be for love? Why the heck not? We don't know. And then one way this question has played out even in adaptations is in the series Anne with an E, where Diana's wealthy great aunt Josephine is depicted, in fact, as openly queer and in a partnership with a woman, which we love that for her.
Absolutely, right? And goes again to our eternal question about Aunt Josephine's backstory.
The most important mystery
I
in the Anne
know.
series for me personally.
Exactly.
You know, and I even think there's an argument to be made, and perhaps this argument has been made, I just haven't come across it yet, but that Matthew is a queer character. You know, again, when we're talking about sort of a softer side of masculinity, a less traditional side of masculinity, Matthew definitely springs to mind in the context of these books. Here's a man who is afraid to talk to women, who isn't in the company of women at all, other than his sister, and who lives, you know, kind of almost like this like hermit like lifestyle outside of the community, who has made himself a bit of like a social outcast by virtue of his shyness, by virtue of his awkwardness. But where is that shyness and awkwardness coming from? We don't know. There is an open question there, and one potential answer could be that he's queer. So I think it's interesting to think about. I think these books are rich texts for this, and I know from experience, from talking to lots and lots of readers of these books over the past few years, that this is how a lot of people are reading these books and seeing themselves in these characters. It seems like queer people have been finding their own kindred spirits in these books really almost from the beginning. So much so that Ella Montgomery herself felt the pressure to clarify that she was not herself a lesbian. And her statements on this topic are rather homophobic, typical for the time period, but still not great by our standards. And whatever her intentions have been in the writing of these books, the fact is that in the century since they were published, LGBTQ people have seen themselves in the characters and in the relationships in the Anne series. I'm going to share a few links in our show notes for some articles about queerness in these books, which I do hope you guys will check out if you want to know more.
Ah, I love that. I'm glad we got a chance to follow this train of thought a little bit more.
Yeah, it's something I've been wanting to do for a while. That's why we're doing it now. So, Reagan, another thing that always made us laugh in reading these books, or made us a little bonkers crazy, was Shirley Blythe.
Oh, Shirley. Justice for
Justice for
Shirley.
Shirley. So poor Shirley, of course, his age changes all the time. No one knows how old he is. He doesn't have any stories that are especially specifically about him, and he's just like the overlooked Blythe kid. And you know what? We forgive Maud for this. In a long series that was written over the course of many decades, there are plenty of overlooked characters and moments. So, Reagan, what else is missing from this series in your mind?
Well, here's a big one. Marilla's death.
Yes, Marilla's death.
And I don't know about you, Kel, but I have always been very sad we didn't get more about Marilla's death. Never even mentioned except in passing in Rilla of Ingleside. And I'm sad about it for two reasons, really. The one, as we talked about kind of in our first season, Marilla's growth arc and relationship with Anne is just one of my favorite things about the first book, that gradual thawing and finally letting herself love Anne fully, and Anne being able to receive the love that Marilla so often cloaks in sarcasm and rigidity, mostly to protect her own self. In the other, we got to see how Matthew's death is pivotal for Anne, and such a gentle picture of grief that we all always tear up over. And I wish we got to honor Anne and Marilla's relationship more. I must imagine that getting to have Marilla in her life all the way through Anne's adulthood for Anne, getting to see Marilla grandparent Anne's kids, that must have meant something deep for Anne, who lost her own parents so early. And getting to see her grieve that loss and honor that relationship would have been so important. It feels, I don't know, a little bit of a slap in Marilla's face to not spend time there. And I
Yeah.
guess, Maud really couldn't put it in Rainbow Valley because Anne isn't really a character in Rainbow Valley. And Rilla of Ingleside is already full of grief and heartache. But even if she had just spent some time at the beginning of Rilla of Ingleside, something where Anne is specifically missing Marilla, or when Walter dies, having Anne wish that she had Marilla to lean on. It's such an important moving relationship, and Marilla's just it's just dismissed off the page.
Yeah, and Marilla does. She deserves better. She deserves to be properly grieved and mourned, especially in light of how defining Matthew's death is. Matthew's death is the emotional fulcrum of Anne of Green Gables, and then Marilla's death is like barely referenced. It does seem sad. It seems like an opportunity lost. Yeah, I agree with you there, friend.
The other, and this again, obviously, I'm very focused on like Anne's emotional arcs here as an adult, because one of the other things that's missing for me is Anne's emotional interior perspective on early parenting and motherhood. Like, I would have loved to see more of that. Maud did such a beautiful job, and this goes back to the grief around Marilla, because Maud did a
Mm.
beautiful job with Anne's grief over baby Joyce and showing the heartbreak of infant loss. And I wish we had gotten some of what it was like for Anne to mother her children, to mother after that loss, to mother after having such a turbulent childhood herself, to not have any memories of her parents when she was a young child. What did it bring up for her to be able to give her children the loving, protected childhood she never got? What does she see when she looks at her young children? Also, is she ever exhausted, grumpy, and touched out as a mother of frickin' 6 kids? I mean, I would read that book. I want to know.
Yeah, it is too bad that we don't get to see Anne's experience of motherhood in that way. We know from her children's perspective that she is a loving mother. And, we know from sort of community perspectives that she's almost like an angelic, perfect mother in a lot of ways, which is very interesting. But
But it doesn't give us any nuance, right? Like, that's not
no.
actually interesting.
It's not. For someone like Anne, who's so emotionally deep, she must have had a very complicated relationship with motherhood. I'm sure it was not an unqualified, ever positive good for her. I'm sure she had moments, right, of grieving the loss of her first daughter and grieving her own childhood and the things that she didn't get, right? Probably especially comparing herself at age 6 and 7 and 8 to her children at 6 and 7 and 8, and seeing how they got these beautiful, like carefree childhoods. And Anne's childhood was, anything but that. So I do think that was kind of maybe a missed opportunity. And I wonder a little bit about Maud's decision to omit that. It does seem like when we're at the point in the books where we're focused on Anne's family, we're really just writing like cute stories about children and little community vignettes, and Anne's interior life just isn't front and center anymore. We love Anne. I would have loved to have known how she reacted to motherhood.
And he does say something a little bit on, and I don't know whether this goes to what was the idea at the time, or whether she just didn't have anything to say about it, about how women lose their main characterness once they become moms.
Mm-hmm. It does kind of seem like that is like the implied message there. I will say, because I'll just go out and say it, we all know who. I'll just be very
Uh-oh.
on brand. My the thing I feel like is missing from these books is sex. Um, and yes, I understand the time period they were written in and the audience they were written for, that it's not really a reasonable expectation. But for books that are
Yeah, it's not going to be
deeply,
like heated rivalry.
ugh, you know what? Few things can be, Reagan. But for books that are deeply, deeply romantic, I mean, breathlessly romantic, these books are sadly sexless. There's not even like any sort of like eroticism in Anne and Gilbert, like a touch or a look or a kiss. Like, there's plenty of books out there that are pretty chaste, but they have a like a strong sort of like frisson
Yeah.
of sex, and these books just have nothing.
Yeah, like a chargedness.
Energy, yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Exactly. Where like maybe nothing happens, like you don't see anything, but you get the feeling that's like crackling between them.
I mean, did Anne not have opinions on like Gilbert's forearms or his shoulders or
Right. Did she ever
anything? Like,
notice? She notices what his chin in profile at Queen's or
yeah,
something.
that didn't do
That's
anything
about the
for me
most.
personally.
That's what I was. Well, they're pretty passionless. Like, and we always keep
Yeah.
complaining about this, but in Windy Poplars, anytime the letters get anywhere close to being like romantic, I would assume like they're hinting at even the idea of passion. She
Mhm.
immediately redacts it. The sexiest thing we get is that she tells Gilbert, whatever grumpy old lady it was, would she think it's scandalous for you to kiss me on the nape of the neck? And that's it. That's in
That
eight
is the
books.
that is the sexiest moment in the entire books. That's not saying a lot, but I will say that nape of the neck kisses are actually the number one sexiest kiss. So for that reason, I guess
That's
that's
it.
something. We see all the reasons that Anne and Gilbert are a perfect match, and we see all the ways they are passionate about each other, right? Their academic rivalry, their growing friendship, the respect they have for each other, the sort of tensions that arise between them during Anne of the Island. Truly, the romance is beautiful in these books, but then it just sort of like, there's a proposal and then it just sort of like frizzles into the air and like nothing ever comes of it. And it's like they had a lot of children. I know what they were doing and I would like to know more about it. Well, so one place where readers and writers often turn to when there are scenes that we wished were in the original text is, of course, fan fiction. And occasionally, very occasionally, because neither Reagan or I are huge fanfic readers, but we do talk about the fanfics that we would love to see. We've even recommended at least one Anne series fanfic that we thought was very good. But I wanted to come back to this today so we could sort of dream up our wildest slash pairings and AUs.
And if
AUs fanfic
anybody,
speak for alternate universe.
yes, and if anybody actually takes any of these ideas and writes it, please let us know.
Let us know. We need to know. I will tell you, in preparation for our episode today, Reagan, I went on Archive of Our Own, which is like the biggest fanfic website, and I did a couple searches just to see what was out there. And it's real interesting. But I'll just say the Anne of Green Gables fanfic that I most want to read is Aunt Josephine's backstory. In season 1, episode 9, we did an entire episode about her, which is interesting considering she is a relatively minor character, but I think it's because we just find her fascinating. When we really were asking, I feel like all the important questions, where did her money come from? How does she have this life of opulence and independence? So I need to know, I need her fanfic, and I absolutely want to keep her partner Gertrude from Anne with an E in there as well. Tell me their whole romantic backstory. I need it.
Yes, I think, did you decide that you thought that Miss Josephine was either once a courtesan or a lady pirate?
Lady Pirate was really where I settled on.
Okay.
I also really want more of Miss Cornelia and Marshall Elliott's relationship. And I'll tell you, when I was poking around to Archive Our Own today, I specifically searched the tag for Cornelia Bryant. First of all, you'll be shocked to know that there were any stories that tagged Cornelia Bryant. I mean, that's such a deep cut in and of itself.
Deep cut.
But I could actually only find one that was like specific to her as the main character instead of, like a side character in someone else's story. But in that one, it was a very cute story depicting her proposal with Marshall Elliott. And I loved it and I gave it kudos and I thought it was just so lovely. So, you know what, you guys, you can find anything on AO3, go down whatever rabbit hole. What do you think, Reagan? Do you have any other fanfic ideas you'd love to see play out?
Yeah, I have a couple. One, I think Jem and Faith. I think that is a
Mm,
relationship that is got to be really interesting.
yes.
I would love to see that like childhood friendship because they don't go the rivalry route.
Nope.
They're childhood friends, but they're seem like personality wise, they're such a match. I would love to see Jem and Faith's romance, and then like
When does Jem fall for Faith? That's what
right.
I want to know.
Wait. No, no, no. I want to know why Faith falls for Jem because I think it's obvious why Jem falls for Faith. She's like magnetic.
No, I agree with you. It's obvious that he does, but I'm wondering when it happens because I
Oh,
bet it happens when they're young.
yeah. Kind of the way like Gilbert imprinted on Anne as soon as she smashed that slate over his head.
I bet Jem sees her making the speech to the whole congregation, calling them all out as hypocrites, and is all like, oh, I'm in love.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Like
Okay,
14-year-old Jem is like, that's the girl for me.
that's the girl for me. Yes. And then, you know what? That's a true wartime romance that I really
Oh,
want to
yeah.
read. Here they are. They seem like they're about to embark on their life together as Jem's starting medical school. Their future is before them. And then World War One. And then Faith goes to England so
Faith goes to England.
she can
Ugh.
be near him on his leaves or if he's wounded. That's way better. I like sweet, sweet Rilla. We love sweet Rilla. But Gem and Face romance is the wartime romance I want. Right. What is that emotional experience like for her?
Mm-hmm.
Being so
Mm-hmm.
close and so far at the same time?
Yep.
I think that would be spectacular. As stated about Windy Poplars, I want the full Anne and Gilbert love letters,
Unredacted.
unredacted. Mhm. And honestly, I want more Patty's Place. What were Stella and Priscilla up to? Like, what's going on with those girls? Let's hang out with them some more. What's Aunt
Mm-hmm.
Jimsy's backstory? Also, spin-off where we follow these Spofford ladies around the world on their globetrotting adventures.
Absolutely. There is so much to be mined in Anne of the Island and in the whole like Patty's Place community.
Yep. All right, you got any other ones? Any other ones we didn't mention?
Oh, so many. Well, I absolutely want the R-rated edition of Anne's House of Dreams, obviously.
Okay. Yep. That tracks. Absolutely.
But to kind of build off of your Anne of the Island fix, we need Charlie Sloane's point of view for Anne of the Island. I want the entire book retold through Charlie Sloane's perspective.
That's like a satire, right? Like that's a guy, you see these ones on like Instagram where the guys like those actors who are doing the little sketches and they're doing the good guy, the nice guy trope,
Yes, yes,
right?
totally. Charlie
Exactly.
Sloane is a nice guy is the name of this fic in my mind.
Yes. Yes. And it's all very self-congratulatory about
Yes.
how he is caring for this poor orphan that could be he's going against his mother's grain to like yes, self-congratulatory in a lot of ways.
I think it would be so funny and so
So
good.
funny. All right.
So Charlie Sloane is a nice guy.
Mhm.
I mean, speaking of alternate POVs, I think we need Rainbow Valley told through Shirley's POV. What was he doing during that entire book?
I know. Why don't they ever let me come down to Rainbow Valley? What are they doing over there?
How come all my brothers and sisters are playing without me?
Right. Don't they like me?
And speaking of letters, I would really love to see Anne and Leslie's correspondence with each other during Rilla of Ingleside, especially once Anne figures out that their children are courting. I need to know. I need to know what those two were saying. I would love to see Diana and Fred's courtship.
Okay, I only want to see that if it's secretly like deeply passionate and weirdly kinky.
I assume it is.
Like I feel like
There is no doubt in my mind.
while Anne is like, oh, Fred is so boring. Like Diana and Fred are getting up to all sorts of shenanigans.
You're like, you should have heard what he said in the rafters of the barn the other night. He is not boring. So another thing that's really fun about fanfic is it's a really fun place to play out like what if scenarios. Like what if everything in the book was the same except for one thing?
Mm,
A classic one would be like, well, what if Anne married Roy instead?
right.
Like what would change? How does she and Gilbert still, how do they still end up together if she marries Roy first? Like what has to happen? So that
Mhm.
would be interesting. And another, a what if scenario that plays out in fanfic that I always think is really fun is like a Groundhog Day,
Mm,
right? Like trap the main character in their most pivotal moment and see what happens if they have to do it over and over and over again. I think the Groundhog Day I would choose for Anne would be the slate smashing scene
okay.
to see what she does if she has to repeat that day over and over, see if anything changes. I almost think it won't.
Uh,
Something
what
about that
if, right?
11-year-old
She'd be like,
impulsivity.
it's too tempting every single time.
Yeah.
What if Anne was a boy? What if Marilla and Matthew got the boy that they expected?
What if Anne was a boy? What if everything else is the same? Just same background, just as imaginative, just as talkative, but a boy.
Yeah.
That I think that's great. I want to know. And then fanfic also is like really fun for alternate universe scenarios, right? So like we want to spend more time at Patty's Place. What if Patty's Place was set on like a modern day college campus? Or Anne and Diana as campers at like a modern day Girl Scout camp, or Anne and Gilbert as workplace rivals. Actually, that book has been written. It's called The Hating Game.
That's a great book.
That is a great book. But there's all these kind of fun ways to think about like what happens if we took these characters and plucked them into a slightly different timeline. Fanfic is delightful for all of these imaginings. So I hope that we have inspired some budding fanfic authors out there. Out of all of these books, there's a really just like adventures to be mined.
Amazing. Yes. Please write them. Please tell us about it. We can't wait.
So
Boy.
another thing that we've talked about a ton on this show is the universal reach of Anne. One thing we've never discussed, and I think would be fun to just shout out, are all of the celebrities who love Anne or who have gone on and said that Anne of Green Gables is one of their favorite books. And that group is wide-ranging, including people such as Aretha Franklin. Mark Twain apparently was a huge fan. Margaret Atwood, the author. Kate Middleton, aka the Duchess of Cambridge. Rachel McAdams, who also, of course, did the audiobook reading for Anne of Green Gables. Mindy Kaling is a huge fan. Jennifer Garner is a huge fan. It's so neat to think of all these other people as being sort of part of our extended Kindred Spirits universe.
Yeah. Listen, if we ever get a chance to meet like Jennifer Garner or Rachel McAdams out in the world, we can be like, hey, let's talk about Anne of Green Gables. And then poof, we're in.
There you go. Instant Kindred Spirits.
Okay, so Kelly, now that we have spent 92 episodes talking about these books,
Wow.
I know. How do we respond to them now?
I'm going to be very honest and say that I am ready to set Anne down for just a minute. I need to set her down, step away, get some more clarity for future seasons. We've spent so much time in this world that it's been kind of all encompassing for the past few years. But I will, even as I say that out loud, I reread some big chunks of Anne of Green Gables earlier this year, not for the podcast, just purely for my own enjoyment. And I still loved it. I don't know. I was like, I'm sad. I need a comfort read. I read, 6 chapters from Anne and I was, yes, everything is right in the world again.
Yeah, yeah, it's like the chicken soup for a soul type thing, right?
Totally.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, maybe I'm definitely ready for a little podcast break for a minute. We've been
Mhm.
going pretty hard for 4 years on
We
these
have.
books and on the pod, right? It's different reading the books for the pod than
Yeah.
it is just reading them. That's been great because it's been this whole other exercise in enjoying them. But it's kind of like now that we're actually all done, I kind of want to go back and read Anne of Green Gables again with all that we've learned in mind and read it cover to cover. Because a lot of what we've
Mhm.
been doing, or I don't know about how you've been doing it, but for me in the pod, we're going to start talking about a particular book. I'll read the book all the way through, but I won't necessarily go deep into it. But to make sure that we've got kind of like the themes and stuff that we're talking about, we'll write a recap on it. And so I'm always reading the books in bits and pieces, but I'm often looking for specific
Yeah.
things in the course of talking about Will of Ingleside. Like that book was always by my side. I was always reading parts of it, but I wasn't necessarily reading it like just straight through for enjoyment. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you weren't reading it as a reader, you were reading it as someone who's analyzing and evaluating it. It's
Right.
different.
Now that sort of all of that analysis is done and all the way through, like I kind of have this whole complete picture of the series in
Mhm.
this way, like we've analyzed the whole series. I kind of want to go back and just read Anne of Green Gables again, like cover to cover with what we've
Yeah, like get the whole experience again.
yeah, but I almost wonder, am I going to be able to turn that analysis brain off? I think so.
I think you will. I mean, I have been able to. It's like
Yeah,
I can kind of decide when am I doing this for the deep dive and when am I not.
but maybe not next week.
I also think that because these were books that we read in childhood, we have the opportunity to go back and read them sort of with our kid brains a little bit.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to
Yeah.
just access them from that place of pure enjoyment.
Hmm.
Now that we've done that, do we like the books better, worse, or special third option?
I like that special third option. I like them better. It's not close. I like them much better, which I wouldn't have thought was possible, maybe. I mean, I always loved these books, but now it's like I really appreciate them on a whole other level. They are not perfect books. There are specific things in each of them that don't really work for me. Some of those books have a lot of those things that don't work for me. But after spending this long with them, I really just appreciate them. And the sheer fact that we found so much to discuss, so much richness in terms of themes and characters throughout these books, I think that speaks to to Ella Montgomery's artistry as a storyteller.
Yeah, me too. I find more and more appreciation for them going this deep. I can read the whole book before we start the season on it, and still in like reading it closely for each episode, there are lines I could swear I've never read before,
Yeah.
and yet I read them and they strike me as profound and beautiful. Like, how did I miss that? I'm sure I must have read it. It just didn't catch me. It didn't resonate with me in a way. And so that's something still so amazing about these books, that I'm still discovering those moments or those little pieces in there.
Yeah, I mean, like you can say these are books that we've probably read all of them a dozen times, casually, intensely, many more than a dozen times, probably for
Oh,
some.
yeah.
And yeah, you do. You still come across these lines. The thing that always strikes me actually is there are absolutely those sort of like pearls of wisdom or like perfect turns of phrase where you're just like, wow, Maud really knew what she was doing. But the thing that always sort of like smacks me over the head on reread is how funny they all are.
Mm.
These books are hilarious. We've definitely gotten some good laughs over the course of the podcast. And also sort of having the permission in a way to read them, understanding that they're supposed to be funny. That's a different experience as well.
Okay, how would we now rank the books in the Anne series now? Has that changed for you?
Probably not a ton. I would rank Anne of Green Gables highest. Certainly in previous years, like pre-podcast years, I would have chosen Anne of the Island or Anne's House of Dreams as my top spot because I'm always gonna pick the most romantic book. But just now that we know that book so well, I mean, Anne of Green Gables sets up the entire series perfectly. And it's everything we love. And everything we love about those later books was originally seeded in Anne of Green Gables. It just seems like Maud really understood Anne and her story with total clarity, and then she wrote it beautifully. So after Anne of Green Gables, I think then my favorites are sort of in tiers. Like tier 2 would be all the romance plots, so Anne of the Island, Anne's House of Dreams, or Love Ingleside. Tier 3 would be Anne of Avonlea and Rainbow Valley, and tier 4 for me are the interquels, so Anne of Windy Poplars and Anne of Ingleside. But I will say, nothing wrong with being in the 4th tier. I like and appreciate all of these books a great deal.
Yeah, let's see. I'm not sure, like you, I'm not sure that my rankings have changed significantly. I do think I appreciate my less favored ones a lot more now than I did before. So while that's not necessarily changed their ranking, they're not like as far below. Maybe my 4th tier before was like 1, 2, 3, and then like 4. So I think my top tier is still Anne of Green Gables for the exact same reason as you. She's the girl we all fall in love with that we want to follow over the rest of the books. It's such a beautiful blend of humor and love and poetry. It's a classic for a reason. But I would rank Anne of the Island in terms of my rereadability. Like those two are still very tightly tied because I just think Anne of the Island, and not only is a wonderful romance book, but it's a growing up book and a young adult friendship book. Those two are still in tier 1. Another thing for Anne of the Island that's just making me appreciate more. I don't know about you, but I think our podcasts on Anne of the Island are some of my absolute favorites that we have done.
That was a good season. We did a good job.
I like most of our podcasts. I like most of our episodes. I think we do I don't know. I'm very proud of what we've done, but I don't know. Like I've gone back and re-listened to those episodes a couple times and I was like, oh, damn, I think we were really good here.
I think it's clear we really love that book, and that really came out in that season.
Yeah, so those two are in my tier 1. Like, don't make me choose. Tier 2 is Rilla of Ingleside and House of Dreams because they're both more complex emotionally than some of the other books. Just so much depth, so much heartbreak. There's both have beautiful portrayals of grief. I just think that those two are kind of the deepest books. Tier 3, I think you and I differ a bit. I agree about Rainbow Valley, but I honestly love Windy Poplars. And I do think for rereading, I would rank Windy Poplars over Rainbow Valley. I don't know. There's just something about all those matchmaking shenanigans that I very much enjoy and find charming, even though there's not a lot of Anne plot. There's not a lot of plot, but
there's so much Pringles.
There's
true.
So
many Pringles. The
that's
Pringles
true.
Just keep happening.
There are definitely too many Pringles.
The best part of Anne of Windy Poplars is the Tom Gallon house.
Yeah, I don't know. I know liking Windy Poplars or ranking it on the higher end puts me often on an outlier, but I really like Windy Poplars. I find it pretty charming. The last tier, 4th tier for me, is still in last place, Anne of Avonlea and Anne of Ingleside. And again, but not as low ranking as they were. Like 4th place it's a stronger 4th, if that makes sense. You know, for both of them, there's not really a strong through line. It's lots of little small town dramas, but the tones of them are very different. Like I think Anne of Avonlea Avonlea is lighter and it feels young. And there is a lot to enjoy there, but it has too much Davy and Paul Irving, who I also find kind of annoying, and far too much time recording the silly things Anne's pupils say and write. Like that really lost its charm for me. I like Anne in that book, but I don't really care about I know they're meant to be humorous, but like the little essays her pupils write, I don't know. I don't think we need that many of them. And Anne of Ingleside is definitely the heaviest, not in terms of depth. If Anne of Avonlea is like fizzy and effervescent, Anne of Ingleside is like thudding. But I learned a lot from doing our episodes about it. So I appreciate it more, but it's probably not making my reread list.
I mean, I think both Anne of Ingleside and Anne of Wendy Poplars for me suffer from the sort of like first act crank problem.
Mm.
Right. So with Anne of Ingleside, we're just stuck with Aunt Mary Maria for so long. And then with Poplars, we're stuck with the Pringles. And I'm just, ugh, can we do something more fun, please?
Yeah, fair. Yeah, at least the Pringles involves finding out about cannibalism.
That's true. The Pringles storyline is more entertaining than Aunt Mary Maria, which is just a slog.
Yeah. If we had a podcast do-over, what would we spend more time on?
A really good question, especially because we've covered so much. So it's sort of like, what even did we leave out? But I do have an answer because I think we could have gone a little deeper into some of our Anne of Green Gables analysis. You know, that was the first book we did, obviously. That was the first season of the pod. I think we were still kind of figuring out how this was going to work for us. And when I think about our episodes about Marilla and Diana, especially, which I'm very proud of, but these are these huge and vitally important characters who completely define not just the trajectory of that book, but of the series to come. And I just think we could have said more. We could have said a lot more about them. And you know what, listeners? We very well might, because as we move forward with the show, we do want to continue to find ways to return to Green Gables, return to our roots. So we may continue to do some episodes here and there about those themes and characters that we really want to revisit.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that would look like yet, but I agree. We've learned a ton in the course of doing this podcast, and now we've met so many wonderful academics and experts. I would love to get some of their takes on Anne of Green Gables and have some of those
Absolutely.
conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd love to spend more time talking about Marilla. That episode was a real turning point for us in terms of like the shape of the podcast, and I'm proud of it. But that was
Mhm.
the first time we were flexing that muscle. Now that we've had so much more practice, I think we could do a lot more with it now than we did then.
Yeah, we're just a little better at it now. And I think we could look back on some of that and do a little better. So yeah. So Reagan, did we ever answer our sort of big defining question? Or maybe this is now the moment. What is it about these books that makes them so iconic? It's so indelible, so universal. You know, I think we have answered this question quite a lot and in a lot of different ways. Anne's story, of course, is very particular to her and to her time and place, but the emotional truths that ground the plot are timeless. At their core, these books are about belonging to a place, to a community, to a family. It's right there in the title, Anne of Green Gables. And I'm remembering picking up this book when I was a kid and thinking about that title. The title alone sort of made me wonder, what was I of? Especially growing up with divorced parents, that concept of home was really fluid. Like having two homes can sometimes feel like having no homes. Was I Kelly of Dana Point? Was I Kelly of Sherman Oaks? Was I both or neither? I mean, those are the kinds of things I started thinking about when I looked at the cover of the book for the first time as a kid. So these books really do capture that sense of like place. Where are you? Where do you belong? And so when I was reading these books for the first time in childhood, I was asking myself the same questions Anne asks. Where is home? Who are my people? Who are my friends? What is my community? And those are universal questions, absolutely tied to our experience as humans, as social beings. So, of course, these beautiful books that are also gorgeously written, so funny, so charming, emotional, of course, they've always been popular.
Yeah. There's something both universal and specific about Anne's story. And I think that's why it continues to resonate with generation after generation. That idea that even if you've never had a place to belong, if you feel unwanted, you will still be able to find home, find people to love and people to love you, to make the community you want in this world. And I think importantly, that your mistakes, your foibles, your perceived flaws don't make you unlovable. They actually are what make you specifically beloved. Maud tells that story with such warmth and humor and poetry, and she makes Anne live and breathe on the page. Anne's voice is unique and her personality so vivid and charming. You can't help but want Anne to be your friend too. And I
Hmm.
think that's what makes all those who love Anne all kindred spirits. We're all her friends. We're all part of her circle.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, Reagan, I think we've puffed our last sleeve.
We did a good
We've
job. High fives, virtual high fives.
virtual high fives. We promised you all a hodgepodge of an episode, and you definitely got one. Let's wind up with a quick inspired by Anne. What do you got, Reagan?
Okay, so I am going to recommend something for all of our bookish friends because this is a book club. So I'm going to recommend my current bookish obsession if you guys need something to keep you busy over summer while we are on break. This should definitely do it. So my daughter has gotten both Kelly and I absolutely hooked on the video game called Tiny Bookshop.
Tiny bookshop.
Tiny Bookshop. We are both obsessed.
Obsessed.
You can play this on most platforms like PS5, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, or on the computer. I am not a gamer at all, much to my husband's chronic disappointment, but I love this cozy game. Essentially, you own a tiny bookmobile in a cute fictional seaside town and you drive around to different locations and you sell books. You get to decorate your little bookmobile as you buy furnishings and paint and decorations, and you get to stock your shelves by genre and try to get the right balance of genres for each of your locations. And you meet some of the townspeople and you do cozy little quests for them, like bringing somebody their favorite tarts when they're in the hospital.
Yeah.
You just helping all the little people in the town. But I think both of ours, our favorite part of the game is you get to recommend books. So a customer might come in and they ask for a classic, but it's got to be under 200 pages and have a happy ending, or a crime novel that doesn't have any gore. And so then you click around on your shelves, and as you click each book, you see a little blurb, and they're all real books. I mean, there's a few like fictional ones that are specific to the town, but they're real titles with real descriptions. And you try and find a book that matches what they want. And I found at least three Ella Montgomery books on the shelves. So Anne of Green Gables is there. Sometimes it shows up as a classic, sometimes as a kid's book. The Blue Castle shows up under drama because it's a romance story. And The Story Girl, which also shows up, I think, often as a kid's book. So I get to actually recommend them to customers if it fits the recommendation. And if you nail the recommendation, the character buys the book and then it inspires other customers to buy more books. And sometimes you don't have a book that works or they disagree with your recommendation.
It's so fun.
And
The
it's so
recommending
fun.
book part is the best part. And it's like the books that are available to recommend are, like Reagan said, they are, for the most part, real books that exist in the world. And if you are a reader, you will see a ton of books that you have read there. And it really kind of feels like you are recommending to like your own little virtual customers. I always think of myself as like kind of handing them a book like, oh, I loved this one. You'll never guess the twist. It's really, really fun to cosplay a bookseller.
I love it. A lot of times you get customers asking for books and they say, oh, I love animals. And then you get to recommend Moby Dick to them. And they're like, I love the cute animals in Moby Dick. And you're like, sure, baby, enjoy.
Enjoy the whale.
Oh, I've wasted far too many hours on this game already. So, guys, if this episode doesn't come out on time, it's probably because I'm busy repainting my little bookmobile, decorating it with flowers instead of editing. If you've ever wanted to own your own little bookstore, this is the game for you.
I have also wasted many happy hours on this little game. And like Reagan, I'm not a big video game person at all. Yeah, I heartily co-sign this recommendation, Reagan.
All right. Well, there you go. Don't blame us if you're glued to your couch playing this game, but enjoy.
Okay, so for my inspired by, I was going back to our roots and I was thinking about the podcasts that inspired us to even do this project. So the by far the biggest one was Binge Mode Harry Potter, hosted by Mallory Rubin and Jason Concepcion. Our podcast is also partially inspired by the first season of the podcast Fated Mates, which was hosted by Sarah McLean and Jennifer Prokop. And now both those podcasts did the exact same thing that we're doing. Just long, chatty episodes that go very, very deep into a particular book series. Binge Mode, obviously, was covering the Harry Potter series, and they were going super slow, super deep, like chapter by chapter analysis. And honestly, that's a great listen. You know, I know Harry Potter is problematic because of its creator, but if you do want to revisit that series, doing it through Binge Mode is a great way to do that. And then Fated Mates, that podcast was covering the romance series Immortal After Dark. which if you are a romantasy reader, you need to read. That's, those are like the ancient texts. You must go back to them. But listening to both of those shows really gave us permission to like dive deep into a text and take our time talking about something we love a lot and spending a whole episode about one character or one theme or sometimes one scene. So as we are wrapping up the Anne series, I was thinking about what other like long book series I would love to podcast about or listen to a podcast about. So that's my Inspired by today. 2 book series that would be worth podcasting about. So I think this is going to be great for padding out your summer reading list after, of course, you refresh on Emily of New Moon. Reagan, I would love to do a podcast about the Miss Marple books. Miss Marple is one of Agatha Christie's recurring characters. She is an older woman living alone in a small English village, and she notices everything and everyone. She's a great observer of human behavior. And so because of that, she becomes a very capable amateur sleuth. I think that the Marple books are some of Agatha Christie's absolute best, especially if you love a cozy murder mystery in a charming English village. These books are also doing a ton of interesting work when it comes to the characters and the people that we often underestimate in society. I just think that if you and I were to do a podcast on the Miss Marple books, we would have so much to talk about, Reagan.
Okay. All right. That's a possibility.
And I also think we would crush a podcast about the Temeraire series. We've talked about this one before, but this is Naomi Novik's alternate universe historical fantasy series that reimagines the Napoleonic Wars with dragons. And yes, it is as good as it sounds.
They are so good.
I think my obsession with the Regency and your obsession with dragons makes us the perfect podcasting duo to take on those books. And bonus, our husbands would be so pleased because we would actually have them on as our guests, something we keep telling them that we will never do until they actually read the Anne books.
Literally, Kelly, I'm going in to record with you today. And Steve's like, you don't want to have me on the pod today on like your hodgepodge episode? And I was like, you haven't read the book still.
What hodges are you adding to our podges?
But you're right. If we did Temeraire,
yes,
they could actually come on the podcast. Possibly. Mm-hmm. We'll see if they have anything meaningful to add. But they have read those books. So
yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, good ideas. Really great series though.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for listening, Kindred Spirits. As we said, this is our last episode of season 5, but do keep an eye out on your podcast feeds because we will be releasing a few summer surprises, including some bonuses from our time on Prince Edward Island and the Ella Montgomery conference. So look forward for our live recording from that conference.
Our planning for next season is underway. As we have said, we're going to focus on the Emily books, though we will always find a way to bring it back to the Anne series as well along the way. We are still in the planning stages, so if you have any ideas for any episodes about Emily, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Mm-hmm. And obviously, get started on those Emily books so you will be ready to read along with us in the fall.
If you'd like to support the show, a 5-star rating or review means the world to us. And we'll send you a sticker as a little thank you if you leave one. You can find everything, including links to our Instagram and our bookshop.org page in the show notes. Until next time, Kindred Spirits, happy reading.
Bye, Kindred Spirits.